Thank you so much, Randy, Elise, and everyone here at Ruby City for having us. Before we dive into hearing from this esteemed panel of artists and luminaries, I just wanted to zoom out a little bit and talk about the context within which we're sitting. This Brillantes exhibition is such a special recollection of this body of work that Celia created in 2002. And thinking back to San Antonio in 2002, the city was 1.1 million people. The Riverwalk was still mostly just a tourist attraction, primarily downtown. The Contemporary was still Blue Star. Ruby City was a dream that many people had, but had yet to be realized. And I was still in high school. And I say that I would go to First Fridays, and I would see these artists that are sitting in front of me, and I would see their work, and I'd hear about them. And some of them I knew, some of them I didn't, but we rubbed shoulders. And I was so inspired by the work that they were creating, the way that they were asserting themselves, their identities, our shared cultura, and affirming that, the work that we make in this city was important and valid and deserved to be celebrated, deserved to have a platform and a stage. And at the same time that I was taking all of this in myself, and why I'm so excited to be in conversation with everyone today, Celia was visiting frequently and spending time in San Antonio, immersed in the Latino art community here. And so she started the project of Semejantes, Personajes, really photographing these artists wherever they wanted, using the Holga camera to create these multiple exposures that captured their dynamism, captured the excitement and spirit of their work. We see, today looking back, we look at these perhaps with a little bit of nostalgia, wistfulness. I know if it's anything like me, when I look at pictures of myself from 22 years ago, sometimes there's a little bit of cringe or, gosh, I can't believe I was ever that young. And yet I think that there's also so much pride that I hope that we all feel looking at these images. Some of the people that were photographed from these series are no longer with us. Some of them have left San Antonio or left the arts, but we're so fortunate to have with us this incredible group. And I'd like to begin by asking everyone first just to briefly introduce themselves and to tell us how you found yourself in front of Celia's camera. Who were you in 2002? We can start with you, Cruz. We'll just go down the line.
Hello. I'm Cruz Ortiz. I live here in San Antonio. Originally from Houston. So.
What were you doing?
I don't remember. I know that I had a mortgage, and there was lots of stress. I had children, and I was doing my best to figure out what art meant. So.
Oh, I have my own. I had to share. I like to share. My name's Ethel Shipton. 2002, got a job at the McNay. Was there for 13 years. Got married, bought a house, and Cruz was actually, I can tell you what he was doing because we moved to the east side, and he started Pushcart Derby, where he had artists come and make cars and pretty much revitalized that part. But I mean, he's paying me to say these things. So anyway, that's what I was doing. I was part of the community. I was so happy to meet these people. Terry was one of the first people I met, David, and then the Tejano Film Festivals, how I got to know Jimmy. Jesse I knew longer than I know anybody. And then Ana I knew, and I just came to this community in 1997, and by 2000 I felt like it was home.
Thank you.
Buenas tardes, my name is David Zamora Casas. Ethel just called me David.
I'm sorry.
No, it's you're fine. when they wrote this expose on Sandra Cisneros, who's a dear friend, who told me, don't tell anybody that you hate me or that I hate you because I love you. Okay, but I have a love-hate relationship with Sandra. I love her, she hates me, but she says no. So anyway, when she went through this incredible attack on her personal life, I couldn't understand why people were criticizing her for adopting and embracing her Chicano Mexican-American culture, because her mother was interviewed and she said some things, and it was just, I think it was a hateful thing to do. It was not nice. So I talked to another friend who I love, not just because he's so gorgeous and handsome and smart, John Philip Santos, but because he was always great at giving me advice. And it's wonderful to have friends that you could look to for advice. So he said, lo que pasó, David, and he called me Davidón. He said, lo que pasó, Davidón, is que Sandra went through a process of desagringando, where you let go of your the culture that you inherit, the culture that you are spoon-fed, that the culture you are expected to swallow without questioning. And he said that we all go through that process. And as a gender-fluid, queer-identified Joto Mariposa man, I thought, well, I did the same thing when I went out of my half-foot in, half-foot out of the closet. You know, I let go of my heteronormative ideology and started thinking, well, I'm just the same but different, you know? So that being said, my art has always been rooted in the political and in art that dealt with the emotion of love, the geographies of love, like Tomás Ibarra Frausto says. And one of the first inspirations when I was in San Antonio, and I was also a young little thing one time, I drove by Divine Road. There's Trinity University and other places now that popped up, but there was this family, a father, a mother, and a little kid. And the father, this was in the 80s, and I get choked up when I think about it, but the father was holding a sign that said, I will work for food. And I said, a la chingada, this is tough. So that was really one of the most inspirational moments for me when I saw a man, and this was before all the immigrant hate and the immigrant influx, and you know, a long time ago. But to see someone with the sign, I will work for food, was one of the most heart-opening experiences that, along with many other things, has led me to use my art to be a powerful vehicle for whatever change, whatever understanding, whatever problem, situation we want to address, to see it in another light, a light that will help us heal. That's what I'm about. And I don't like to talk about myself because, you know, if you have to tell somebody you're a witch or a curandera, then you ain't really a curandera, you know? So I love this community. I fell in love with Mia when she was in diapers. No, not really. But, and I admire artists because artists are the nalga shakers. They make political movements that we can say what we have to say. And I've been asked by little kids, what you are? And I said, I'm an artist. And they, but you're wearing makeup. I said, yeah, you can too. And so, hablando se entiende la gente. And I will pass on my platform to Jimmy Mendiola. Gracias.
How do you follow David? My name is Jimmy Mendiola. I'm a filmmaker and a writer, originally from San Antonio. I got this email from Randy saying, hey, we're doing this show based on these photographs that Celia took of artists. Would you like to participate? I said, that sounds great, but I don't remember being in any photo. He sent me a picture, and there I was, and two things. As a long time ago, and my hair is really gray now. It kind of freaked me out. There are a couple of things. The turn, I don't want to get too much into it, but my most immediate thought was the term Latinx didn't even exist back then, which tells me that identity and how we call ourselves changes, and that's a good thing, which goes back to what was I doing back at that time. I was making a movie. I was not living in San Antonio at the time. I spent about 23 years in California, but all my work has been about here. And it was a very specific movie about a punk band that takes over a float during the Fiesta Battle of Flowers Day parade. And it incorporated a lot of art scenes. And I guess the thing that is consistent for me at least, is specificity of place and culture. And that's the one thing that seeing all these pieces and listening to David talk and stuff, it kind of reminds me of is specificity for me is really important, and the cultural identifying thing that I've become really comfortable with living here now is Tejano, and I'll pass that on now.
My name is Terry Ybañez, and I'm an artist and educator from San Antonio. I've always identified myself as a Chicano artist. I met Celia through Joe Diaz, Cesar Martinez, and Benito Huerta, and Sandra Cisneros as well. And I had just gotten back in 2001 from Kuwait. I worked over in Kuwait for a little while at a scientific center, educating Kuwaitis to do programming, mixing science and art. And when I got back, I ran into Celia, and she says, "Hey, I'm doing this project." And I had just finished fixing my first house, the first house that I owned, over on Burnett Street on the east side. And I remember Celia coming to the house and how excited she was, because she was documenting through this imagery of her camera all these artists that were friends of mine. Every single artist in this show is a very dear friend of mine. And I thought that I would never get to see the photographs. And when I knew she was having an exhibit, because she showed this exhibit in another space prior to coming to the space, I was very excited because I hadn't seen the images as a complete exhibit. So one of the things that I remember from that moment is that her excitement, Celia's excitement. But I have to say that it's also interesting. It's an interesting documentation of artists from San Antonio that for many years could not get shows, valid exhibits in the spaces here in San Antonio. Spaces started opening up. Blue Star started opening up its doors to more diversity. McNay started opening up their doors to more diversity. Zama started opening up their doors to more diversity. Because it wasn't here. And so what I take from this exhibit is that moment in time that she captured all of these artists, where we're all trying to figure out how do we succeed in the business of making art? How do we succeed in the business of getting what we believe in and what we want to share with our community? And I think for myself, I'm still figuring it out. And so I really appreciate that Celia took the time to do this documentation. I want to just do a shout out to some of the artists that are no longer with us. Jose Angel Rodriguez, Chuck Ramirez, Mel Casas, Adan Hernandez, Alex De Leon, and Jose Gandara. These are artists that were very, talking about movers and shakers, they were some of the ones that were starting that shaking in the community to get doors opened and get seen as valid artists. And so I thank you, Celia, for documenting these artists.
Hi, Jesse Amado. And I first met you, it was in the early 90s in Houston. We were in a show together at CAM. Do you remember that? Yeah. And then, of course, we kept in touch ever since then. And as far as you coming and taking photographs, there was two things. Well, you being there, it seems suddenly you were there, And I was trying to get like 40 drawings ready for a show, and so I was kind of preoccupied with that. And so I don't know if that reflects in that. But, so it was very brief, but it was good because you let me do it and you just were there taking your photographs. And I appreciated that instead of having me, pose or something like that. Anyway, and it's great to see you still, both of us. I mean, I'm talking about, I started taking classes in '84 at SAC. So I'm talking about a 40-year career here. So we both go back a long ways and have some things that, we could probably talk about for hours over. Choose your beverage, it doesn't matter. I like all beverages. But I guess we'll get into further topics, about my experience, first of all, as a Latino artist in San Antonio. I'd say I got my MFA in 1990, so things started happening there then. And it was a different climate, and so there was obstacles that I had to climb that were not similar, to what was mentioned. And so my intent was to, have another world except a person like me making abstract art. And so that was the hurdle, the bigger hurdle for me. So I can talk about that later, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Hi, I'm Anna, and I remember Celia came to my studio in Cattleman Square neighborhood, and I can't remember exactly how we met, but when Ruby City reached out to me and they showed me this photograph, I thought, what is Patricia Ruiz-Healy doing in front of my artwork? Because I looked like a gallerist, and I thought, is that me? And so then I started thinking about the work I was doing. I didn't have a place to show my work, and so I started curating my own shows along Austin Highway, and I brought this book that it's a guest book from a show I organized at the Alpha Hotel. The Alpha was owned by a high school friend of my dad's, Porfirio Arana, and it was supposed to be a bed-in for peace, and Porfirio shut it down because I brought candles and he was afraid I'd burn his hotel down. But I got some people to submit word salads, and I'll read you a few of them. Satan greasy necktie, heroin bunny dumplings, chocolate dust cloud race house, prostitute needlepoint, textured joy jelly, academic beaver paste, and anyway, it goes on. But I was thinking how similar things are, talking about word salads and how we could still have a bed-in for peace. And my work, I don't think it's concerned with so much with Chicano identity, but with the advancement in DNA, I feel like we're all more alike than not. But I want to thank you again for bringing us all together again and reminding me of how we're related. I worked with Cruz at San Anto, and I lived with David. I worked at San Anto, and that connected me with Jimmy, and my best friend from college worked with Terry at Brackenridge, and then my best friend from elementary school almost married Jesse. and I dated a high school friend of Ethel Shipton's from Laredo. So anyway, that kind of ties us all together.
We could turn the panel into 6 degrees of Anna.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you all so much. I am, of course, familiar with all of you and your work, leading up to this conversation, but I'm really struck by some of the through lines that came out. All of you, of course, very distinct practices, distinct lives, have been in different parts of the state, different parts of the country. But I couldn't help but think, that this time capsule, yes, captured this moment of synchronicity, everybody kind of being in San Antonio, but also that, at least two of you mentioned, buying a home, and what that means, starting your life, thinking about other things that you started or were invested in, with Cruz, with Dignity Hill, and the Pushcart Derby, Terry teaching, Jimmy involved with, the film community here, all of these ways that you were engaging with the community and really changing it and leaving your mark. And so I wanted to, in a way, fast forward to the present day, but ask you to really reflect on what has changed in your artistic practice since this photo was taken, and maybe what has changed in whatever you consider community in your life since 2002. And I realize that that's a really huge, sweeping question. I mean, so much, of course, the world around us has shifted, but maybe if just, what immediately kind of comes to mind. I appreciate so many of you, really speaking from the heart, and perhaps, don't say it so much to me, but maybe tell Celia, what have you been up to for the last 22 years?
Doing the road thing. Okay.
We'll go again. That seemed to work last time.
Okay, we can do it. Well, if I'm looking at the photograph, I definitely got more gray hair, of course, and I was definitely skinnier, I guess. But as far as the practice, I think about what I was doing back then, and I had no idea. And then there was this period of my life where I was so aware of what I was doing. And now, in a weird way, I'm back at that point where I don't want to know. So I'm kind of like letting go, and there's this sense of like freedom to that. And I know we'll talk about that also with the issue with identity. I thought about identity a lot, but it wasn't the main focus. I think for me, I didn't want to be in that box. That seems very white supremacist kind of categorizing, putting patches on people and stuff. Like, I didn't want to do that. And I think that's something that I always go back to those days of the edginess of the work. And the more I think about everybody on this panel, it was all edge. I mean, from the folk art church that David had, that was intense. I mean, pretty vacant. I mean, there was a lot of stuff going on at that time that was just pretty hardcore. And so yeah, it's nice to see other stuff happening. So.
Thanks.
What was the question?
What have you been up to for the last 22 years? In 2 sentences.
I've been part of the community for a long time. I think at that time I was also running, just finished closing off a project that was called Project Room, which is a one night only from my studio in Blue Star. It was one night only, and I have to say the hardest person to get out after the one night was Alex de Leon. He wanted to stay, but it was my studio, so we had one night only shows, and First Friday was just kind of starting, so it was an automatic audience, and so that was something that engaged me in the community right away. And of course, I lived in an area in Southtown that we call the Compound, that Mike Casey, who everybody knows, was very, very generous to many of us. I think a few of us lived in that, or at least stayed a long time in several of those houses for almost nothing. It was like there was enough people around to make it affordable for you to actually make your work. And I think James Lifshutz rented nobody's gonna believe it, but for $75 a month was my studio, which was pretty good size, I know, and I couldn't pay the rent. Anyway, and Mike Casey, it was a little 500 square foot house with one bedroom. It's basically the size of Saladillas. It's basically the same thing, and that was $250 a month, and I still couldn't pay the rent. I owed them both money. And at one of the first Fridays, I don't remember who the artist was. It might have even been Alex. Maybe that's why he needed to have it longer. James was going to lock it on me. And I had to beg him to please let me have the show, and I promised, here's $100, I will make good for it. And, and that was the kindness of this place, along with the artists, Then we lived in the compound, it was mostly artists. I think Garcia, she works for the city. Victoria lived in the compound. So you got to know people and move with people, and all these other beautiful things were happening. And I was just getting to know it. But more than anything, people gave you space to make work, and gave you a lot of breaks, and you were able to have exchanges. There wasn't any place really to go eat. Nobody had any money. So you'd gather in the backyard, and before you knew it, somebody was playing music in the backyard, or there was something magical happening, and you just walked out your back door. So the richness of this community, and everybody was doing some amazing things, and everybody would just say, hey, you know what, I'm thinking about doing this thing. What do you think? And they're like, yeah, let's try it. Let's try it. Nobody said no, or maybe I didn't hear it, but that's what this place gave me. I finally found my place when I got here. And Terry, you all had a whole life before I came here with my group of people, and got to meet everybody and find the history of it, and it was just amazing. So the magic was there, and I feel like that's still here. There's a whole other, we're old. No offense to you guys, I'm old, but you are old. But I think it's still happening. Presa House is doing it, you're doing it. There's a whole layer that keeps coming, and it doesn't end, it doesn't seem. I think when I first went to work at the McNay, they have artists looking at art. They used to have this program, and I think Renee Barry was like, are there enough artists? I said, oh yeah, there's enough artists. So it just continues, and the richness of this place, and what Celia captured and understood and continues to understand. Celia came and did a show at Sala Diaz, that's another thing I did recently. Was 2 years ago, Celia? You came to do a show at Sala Diaz with me? Yeah. Right, and you got to meet 2 or 3 other artists that were in their younger women. We got to tell them that the ERA has never been passed. They didn't know. So things like that. And there's just this history that gets passed down in a very much, probably that, if I want to say that's my identity, is I grew up on the border, half Mexican American, and I identify more with my Mexican side. In fact, I often don't remember my English words, but it's just that same kind of community that continues to give here. That I can call 5 people, and that joke is like, how many people do you need to call to have somebody taken out? It's like, I think 3, so it's just one of those places you can call 2 or 3 people, and if you need help, they're there for you, or if not, they'll give you somebody's name. It's just, that continues to happen, I think, and on every level. Mary's at Blue Star, she can call probably any of us, Elise can call any of us. Anybody who's doing something and needs some help, and they call enough people, it's done. And then I think that gives you, that sense of community gives you your creativity, and that's where mine comes from.
And it's so, I think, magical to hear that hasn't changed. We're talking about both 2002, but yeah, in the present day, that sense of intimacy in this artistic community persists. So, David?
I'm a bit sleep deprived. I'm setting up an installation at the Beale House Art Center. It's part of the Chicanx satellite exhibits that the city is sponsoring, because it is Xicanx Month. And so I'm listening and I'm tuning in. And I'm realizing that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The issues of 23 years ago are still the same issues. What women are faced with: fertility control, choices taken away, queers are still getting beaten up, and men are still beating up their wives, and some of their wives are still beating up men. And all these things reflect in each culture and each ethnicity in certain ways because of, social, political, existing trauma, or whatever the reasons are. And so the things that have changed are words like Chicanx. We were Hispanic, we were Americans of Mexican origin, we were Chicano, and now we're claiming the word Chicanx. And that means that we are saying Chicanx to include Chicanos, Chicanas, and all gender non-conforming people. So that has changed. The culture and the landscape has changed. I hate to keep name dropping because Beetlejuice, but a dear writer said that that Mexican Americans come from a place of having things taken away from them. And when we drive around and we see beautiful neighborhoods or shitty neighborhoods or drug dealing neighborhoods, but they're gone because there's all these cardboard boxes. And it's not that I care that people are moving into the city because land is to be there to be gentrified, isn't it? But I realize that those memories are taken, and the culture and the root and the history and the people that lived in these neighborhoods can no longer afford to live in the neighborhoods that their grandparents and their grandparents and their grandparents lived. And so those things have changed. HEB has the best produce, but they close streets and yay HEB, helping everyone here, But lots of things have changed that are good and have a double edge. All the gay bars, all the cool gay bars, all the bathhouses, no hombre, forget it. No, they're still there, but they're in other places. But I'm trying to say, all joking aside, that the cultural specific places no longer exist. And what has also changed is that there are women, Chicanas, and, well, not all Chicanas, but most of the women in the city that run the larger organizations are women. And that's changed from the testosterone-driven other people that, the other people that hold the other half of the sky up. But it's great to see women in those roles because they have a different perspective. Like there was a review written about the Chicanx show that failed to acknowledge that the direction that the two curators, one was from Canada, one was from Mexico. And it was nobody from the United States saying, Mexicanos have a fabulous place, they have a history, look at all the streets of Guadalupe, look at, the names. Chicanos have been here. This was Mexico. And so those things have changed. But the prejudice, the racism, the gatekeepers, the people that have the money, that say and then the oppressed become the oppressor. So it's hard. But we have to keep vigilant and notice these things and speak up. And I'll leave it at that. Gracias.
I'm going to talk about 2 points. What's changed, I think. The first one is looking at demographics. I had the opportunity last year to do a video program at Linear High School, teaching kids video. And they said, you're going to do dual language, you're going to teach kids video, it's going to be great. And I was really looking forward to it. And Linear is like the quintessential Mexican-American Chicano high school. It's been around for 100 years, literally. So I walk in there and I meet the students, these dual language students that I'm going to talk to. And I started asking them where they're from. And first of all, none of them spoke English, which was it's difficult for me. My Spanish is very bad. So that was kind of an interesting challenge. But almost all of them were from Central America. And they weren't Mexican American, and they didn't have any connection to culture and place. And in fact, many of them had come up in that journey with the most horrific stories that we're all familiar with, by themselves, et cetera, et cetera. And their point of reference is not mine, and is not the usual references that Chicano and U.S. Latino art has used. I'm obsessed with the Alamo. A lot of my work is about that, and its symbolism of oppression, et cetera, et cetera. These kids don't care about the Alamo. They've never heard of it, and we don't expect them to. But they're coming from a different place that has its own references, and they're coming here and they're forming their own identity and ideas, and that's the most gratifying thing that I'm seeing in terms of change. It's not monolithic anymore. They're going to change stuff, and they're going to do some really interesting work that's going to be eventually a synthesis of what we've done and what they're bringing to the table. So that part is the demographics of the West Side are changing, and I see it in the kids. It's like a barometer of what's going to come. And then in terms of my own practice, I read somewhere about there are certain ages where certain people do their best work. Mathematicians, if you haven't come up with a formula by the time you're 23, you're over the hill. They do it when they're very young. Writers in their 30s, and I was getting kind of worried. Where am I going to be in this? And what I read is that once you're in your 50s, what you really reach your stride at are historians, and it's because you've reached a certain age where you have perspective and you've seen things before, and you've seen things that have happened in the past, and it kind of gives you a very direct, perspective of what's been happening. And so in terms of my own work, I'm really interested in archives and photographs, and then seeing Celia's work here is a perfect example of capturing a moment, and they work on an artistic level, but they also work on a historical level. There's information in these images that we wouldn't normally get or weren't important back then, but are now, and that stuff's really kind of fascinating for me. And then in terms of, so I'm working on a documentary in the West Side using VHS home movies that were made by the people themselves in the 80s and 90s. But in terms of perspective, I just want to give, before I hand it over, a shout out to, I'm old enough to remember the anti-oppression Church of Hardcore Folk Art that David and Agosto did, and that was a scene, and it wasn't out of any sort of, you guys may have some ideas of art, but it was just a great place to hang out, see new things, exchange ideas. People from Cine Festival that would visit from LA or New York or Puerto Rico would, go there for a party, and it was very dynamic, and who knows how many people, that place influenced. So that's the kind of stuff that as you get older, you remember and want to, let's make a documentary about it or something.
Well, what's changed in my life from 2002 to now is at that moment I was in nonprofit organizations, boards for the arts, SACI, Jumpstart, Stone Metal Press, and now I'm on boards for development. It's weird, for urban development. And it came about, I've been teaching, I taught 32 years art to little kids, middle schoolers, and high school. And somehow in the last 17 years, moving to the neighborhood that I live in now, Mission San Jose neighborhood, I got involved in protecting the missions from overdevelopment. Never in a million years would I think that I would have been this person to be going to City Hall or to the World Heritage Office or to the county asking them to protect a World Heritage site. But there I am. And then I became a president of my neighborhood association. It was the weirdest thing because I had to learn code enforcement, all this unified development code that you guys get fines for, or said, hey, you can't build that carport, or I had to learn all of that. And I asked myself, well, why did you get in that? What was it? Somebody said, hey, I need your help. I think you can articulate what this community needs and wants. And you've been around the block enough that city officials know who you are, and they respect you. So maybe you could speak on our behalf. And I got involved for the last 10 years doing that kind of work. I am now on the Board of Adjustment for District 3. I'm a commissioner, and I listen to these crazy variances, and I'm like, and I ask, every time I'm sitting there, I ask myself, what the hell am I doing in this seat? Because I don't give a hoot about carports or easements, And my thing is, and we need to be at the table. If we're going to complain about something, you need to be at the table. When I was on the art boards for the city, part of me being on that board was I wanted my community to be represented. I wanted them to have a voice. I wanted the organizations that I thought were super important to this city to get the funding that they should get. But somebody has to be there at the table that believes those things, right? So here I am, 22 years later, and I'm still doing the work of speaking up and speaking out and representing my community. My husband says, I think we should move to another country so that you stop doing this craziness, because And I'm like, it doesn't matter where I go. If I see a problem, I'm going to help solve it, right? So you got what you got, right? But that is why I do the things that I do. And my art, as I said earlier, I'm still trying to figure out the direction. I want to say something about a friend of mine who's here, because he went to Trinity University with me, and he taught me a little bit of photography. That's Ann Sincille. And it's really funny because when I see our careers we graduated in 1983. I graduated 82, he graduated 83. You know, just thinking about the trajectory of our careers in this city. And it's funny because he does the same thing with his art. You know, maybe that was kind of nurtured in us at school, you know, but I know my parents didn't nurture it in me. But somebody or some organization out there did nurture that idea of being involved, using your art as part of the involvement with your community, and speaking up.
Are you still getting out of a relationship?
Hmm?
Are you still getting out of a relationship? That's what was happening.
How do you remember that?
I couldn't pass it up. I just couldn't pass it up. That was
I was going to reveal all that, but now I have nothing to say. So let me think. I don't know. Let's see.
Jesse, can you speak into the
There
mic
was
so we can hear you a little bit better?
Sorry.
Thank you.
There were several things that were said over here that I related to. Let's see. In 2003, after that, I moved to New York City. In 2004, and I spent 10 years there, and I became the classic flaneur. I was just on the streets all the time, looking and experiencing, and to me, that takes me back to when I was a kid. You know, I was a child. I was a street kid. I really was. And so I lived near downtown. I lived on Mission Street, you know, and I would be 15 minutes away from town, and I would walk, especially in the summers. And I think a lot of my curiosity for the way I do my work now comes from those experiences. So there I was back in New York City doing that, spending half the time there and half the time here. But, you know, I was mistaken for many, many different races and, you know, countries, you know, Middle Eastern, Far Eastern, you know, as far south as you can get, I guess. And anyway, you know, just on the subway or something like that, you know, start speaking to me in that language. So there wasn't, you know, so I kind of had a revelation similar to yours about, you know, it's just that we're all people, aren't we? And when you go to New York City, where there's over 200, you know, communities there, you really get the full, you know, measure of that. And so I was able to, you know, learn that and value that. And so I was hoping that, and it did, well, it kind of informed my work eventually, but I don't know, it's the curiosity part of it that really sticks with me, is because when I look back, you know, in my life, I feel that, you know, like I said, being a street kid, there was always something on the streets that intrigued me, and somehow I would somehow try to engage myself with that some way. And I had, you know, I got in a lot of trouble sometimes for doing that, but it revealed a lot of things about, you know, the creative experience and the investigation that goes into it, and, you know, but I didn't know it was art. You know, when I was coming up in school, there was no such thing as an art class. But they always came to me first when they wanted a poster or something like that, right? And I would make drawings for my friends, you know, and down, you know, the next 2 or 3 desks down, and mostly I would draw, they wanted me to draw like battleships on the ocean, and then I would give it to them, and then they would blow them all up, you know, with with their pencils and stuff like that. So they really love doing that. And also wrestlers. They love, me to draw wrestlers, so I would do that. So that was the extent of my, visual or, evidential art making process. But other than that, I was just always curious, Then I ended up going to New York this time around, again for the second time. As a young man, I was there, and that's what influenced me probably, I'm sure, I'm positive to be an abstract artist, spending 2 years there in my early 20s. And then, spent some time talking to some surgeons about certain things. So I've been through that a few times, and but it makes it even more marvelous of an adventure, to still be here and still be active as an artist and having, talks like this and people to show up to support and talk to, my fellow artists. Hey, are you listening over there? Ethel. Anyway. So, I'm just, I feel privileged and blessed, I guess, that I'm still here to witness all this, It's time for me to be a witness, and so that's kind of how I go about today. Live for the moment. I don't know about tomorrow, but for today. And so it informs my work all the time. Right now I'm doing some work that is ridiculous, but it has to deal with heat and time. And basically what I've been doing since the pandemic started, it was like everybody else ordering food to go when you get, those styrofoam packages. And one time I had that and I put it in the oven and I forgot about it. No, it was beautiful. It was actually beautiful. And so since then, I collect them. And they sell them by, the dozens at HEB, the styrofoams. And so I've been playing with that and making forms out of that, because after all, that's what I do. I make forms most of all, And so it's a magical thing, because all I have to do is just time it and, adjust the heat. And of course, compose them, now I compose them as I go along, stack them up, let's see what happens. I'm trying to make the tower, what's the name of the tower? I forget about it. Yes, I'm trying to make that tower, but my oven is not big enough, so I'm going to have to figure out how to stack them up, because I think it's 20 tiers of it. But again, it's that curiosity that always engages me about, most of everything, and abstractions, that's how it works best. You're not trying to replicate anything, you're just trying to work with, is there. And like one artist that I was reading about, and she never uses a brush as a painter. Who said something?
I want to make sure we have time to hear from Anna, and then we have one more question. But yeah, thank you so much, Jesse.
Oh, thanks. Okay, so my work at that time I was really focused on permanence, and so I was making work that I wanted to include in the architecture, and the shapes were more based on popular culture and women's hairstyles from the 60s. And listening to Ethel talk about getting a great house from Mike Casey, I got a great house from Rick Casey on Gunther Street, and then Sandra bought it. And my mother would call me every night, because I'm the youngest, and like Water for Chocolate, the safest place for the youngest to be is at home. And she'd say, you know what, are your doors locked? Are the windows locked? Some man could just crawl in through that window and they're going to find your body on the river. You're just going to be floating down the river. So eventually I moved to New York, and I was on my fire escape and I saw a shooting star. Maybe it was a satellite, but I'd like to think it was a shooting star, because we're all part of the cosmos. And I thought about this guy that was in my class that I spoke to for 5 minutes once a week in Spanish, and he was Jewish, and he always had like a stack of books, and he would give me like Jewish History 101. And I thought, wow, why did I think about him? Because we weren't close at all. So I got on my computer, looked up his name, and he had died. And so from that point on, I realized that we are a part of the cosmos. I felt like he was a shooting star returning home. And then, you know, going back to the identity that we share, whenever I traveled in Europe, people could care less if I was Chicano or, you know, what side of the street I was raised or where I went to school. I was still an American. And they would say, oh, the American has installed herself in the kitchen. The American is installed in the living room, like I was occupying the territory. And so I just try not to think about that. And my work is less concerned with permanence now and more about the ephemeral, the rituals, the collective magic that makes us unified as a culture. It's a snapshot of how we live. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So, Ana, that's a beautiful segue into, I wanted just to take a moment, you know, this exhibition, Los Brillantes, features this text that Celia wrote, and I want to take a second to read it in Spanish and in English before I move on to the third and final question. Somos un cosmos de diferentes bríos, escando los poetas, queriéndonos mitoteros. Gritamos y secretamos la angustia y alegría de ser humanos unidos por el color caramelo. Somos tu eco, tu estrella, mírate. We are one cosmos of different brilliance, scandalous poets, lovable agitators. We scream and whisper the joy and anguish of being human brothers united by the color of caramel. We are your echo, your star. See yourself. And what I love about that text, first of all, what a powerful imagery, the caramelo, and above this gorgeous image captured from NASA, but this invocation to see yourself in the work. And so I did prepare all of you with this question ahead of time, so I'm not putting anyone on the spot, but I also understand that it's maybe a big one. If you were to put yourself into Celia's shoes and photograph a few people to be added to the series today, who would you want to have in front of your camera? So I'd like to hear from anyone, and then if there's other closing thoughts, I'd be happy to hear those as well.
Damn, I'm always first. There's a handful. And I'm horrible with names, but there's a young gentleman right now who just had a show at the library. Mauro. Damn, that dude's fire. Yeah, there's something fire about that. And then there's a couple of others. Actually, the whole El Paso scene, the printmakers in El Paso, they're starting the revolution. The revolution will start in El Paso, by the way, just so you know. And it's all those printmakers. There's a beautiful network there that the work that they're doing is just, they're not even thinking, like I said, like they're just making it work. So those are the top two that come to mind.
Thank you.
I usually think about, God, there's lots of them. I think what Barbara Felix is doing lately, both herself and who she's bringing to the table, I think it's pretty amazing. So watch what she's doing. Flores, Adria Flores, love what she's doing. Teresa Newman also. So those are the first that pop up to the top of my head most immediately. And that's not, and I'm sure there's many more, but those are the first three at the top of my head.
I'm such an emotional person that I think that the person that I would first include, and probably the only one I'd care to, would be my mom, my mother, because my mother's 90 years old now, and I spend time with her, and I pick her up, and I sit her on the toilet, and I love her. And to me, she's the most brilliant star. And she says, ay, mira ese americano, dile que es de la mother, tú también eres americana. Sí, pero eres un gringo. I said, pues, pero somos americanos los dos. You know? And she comes from a place of scarcity, and we have to realize that not everyone has the privileges that we have. You know, whether it's a language or whether it's being light-skinned or having a big, whatever it is, you know. So we are blessed with whatever we have, and I think that the first connection that we have with human beings is the one that has the umbilical cord linked to yours, and when you live your whole life, you realize it is your mom. And you probably will think, oh, the most important lessons I learned was from this incredible creature that, you know, fed me and spanked me and everything else. And she was so creative, and she was an artist, and she doesn't know that.
Wow.
So that's what I would say.
That's beautiful. Thank you.
I'm not saying this just to kiss your ass, but I think Mia, Claudio Zapata, and Rigo Luna should go in front of the lens, because I think we're at a stage where we need to recognize our critics and our curators, and this is the level we should be at to be remembered and to start discussions. I think that's a crucial part of any kind of art scene that needs to be nurtured. I think a lot of times we're not critical enough of our work to make it better, and I think we need those people who are just focused on curatorial and writing and that kind of work. So those are the kind of people I think should be in the next series.
Thank you, Jimmy.
I would take a photo of Janelle Esparza. I just love her work. I just think it's amazing what she does with her history and with materials that she uses in a very universal way, but also very personal. Also Ashley Mireles, Ashley Perez, and then Mary Agnes Rodriguez. I think, there's some artists, women artists, or artists, regardless of gender, that sometimes get forgotten, and they're doing unbelievable work, and they work constantly. They're always working and coming up with new bodies of work and new ideas, and sometimes through the shuffle of things, they just get forgotten. And I think that it's always beautiful for me to think about the women, the young women that are coming up, that are doing incredible work. And I know Ashley Mireles, Ashley Perez, and Janelle are doing amazing work. They're just taking it so much further. And when I see shows like the show that's at Blue Star right now, or the Tejano show that Rigoberto Luna curated that was at the Centro, amazing, and it just was like kicking it up a notch, and I just think that the ideas and the materials are incredible of what's coming out of some of these young artists. But those are the four that I would love to take photographs of.
Thank you.
Very well said. That was very good. There's just so many that I forgot. And, but I do know collectively the younger artists are doing exceptionally well, and I'm always so happy to discover that, to encounter that. I've, made up my mind a while back that I was, more than anything, I was going to be a mentor to some of the younger artists. I like going to Second Saturday. There's quite a lot of work there by younger artists, and I try to engage them as much as I possibly can about their work. I try very hard, and it's always fun. I like doing that. And so that's the extent of the names that I can give you, but that is how, I mean, there's my nephew, he's 14, and he plays like a, ragtime and concert piano, and he's amazing. I can't believe that he's so good. He played before 400 people a couple of weekends ago. He's that good, and I can't believe it. We can,
Yeah,
We can include Gareth.
thank you.
I would choose George Ozuna. He was one of my volunteers, adult volunteers at San Anto, and he also taught film at NISA. I don't know where he is now. Is he here? I think he's working for Smithsonian or he's in Africa, but I think he would be great. He's very dedicated and always behind the camera. I think it's his turn to be in front. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I want to make sure, do we have a moment where we can take a few questions from the audience? I know yes? Okay, so we have time for a few questions. So if you want to step up to the front and try to project, you can try to pass. Yes?
I love you all, but what makes you think in 10 years AI won't replace you? That is my question. Have you thought of it?
So the question was, what makes you think that you're not going to be replaced by AI in 10 years? Anybody want to jump in and take that?
I think about it constantly. I mean, come on, you have to think about it. I mean, just it's a contradictory term in my, estimation, and how could it be intelligence? But now it just, adds on to my hysteria about, the internet, and I'm finding it hard to, that it's a trustworthy thing. So that's all.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can say, from a curatorial perspective, AI is at once extremely challenging. It's also, in a way, kind of boring because you see a lot of the same types of things over and over again. And I have yet to see something that uses AI in a way that really actually feels fresh and new. I could be wrong. I'm sure people had a lot to say when digital photography first came out, but I'm not terribly worried about the livelihoods or creativity of anyone on this panel or in the room being negatively impacted by AI.
I actually use AI in making these, in slugging in images that I need for a timeline. That it's a tool. It's not the final product, but
Exactly.
And then I see this guy. His name's Ybañez out of San Francisco, and he's been doing some really interesting things with AI. More so in the commands you give it to kind of create these images.
Mm-hmm.
So he's playing around with it in a different way. Ybañez, René Ybañez, the son? He's doing some, yeah, exactly. His father was René Ybañez. He's very influential Bay Area artist, curator, thinker, anyway. And his son is, embracing it or playing around with it. I don't know what he's going to do with it, but.
Do we have any other? I think we have time for one more question. Oh, great.
When looking back at the photos of yourself and your career back in 2002, what were some things that you might say to yourself, if you were to be able to go back in time back then, to give yourself advice to move forward in your careers at that time for any hurdles and stuff?
That's a great question.
I have a lot to think about that. I wish I had treated my talent as a real career and not second-hand thing. I definitely would have invested a little bit more money, maybe. Like, I would have done all the grown-up things I think about now, but definitely archive more. Because the things I'm hearing from this group, it was just amazing. It was a good time, and I barely remember that stuff, and I just wish I took more photographs. Going to the church, damn, I saw people in leather G-strings get whipped on the cross, and
they were angels.
Planeta Mixteca alone with Terry's photographs, I mean, it was just good stuff. And making stupid videos with Jimmy, it was just great. Seeing Jesse's paper bag stuff, like, what the hell is that? Is that art? Is that art? Is that art? Like, it was just good. The tar paintings of Anna were super cool, and Ethel and Nate doing weird things all the time. Like, it was a good time.
That's awesome. Yeah.
I think art is an amazing tool to learn, to teach by example, and to experience. And one of the things that I would tell myself about my life with my friends and my lovers and family is that I learned that I was suffering from the illusion that I could help someone heal their pain. People have to heal themselves, but as artists, we can contextualize it and teach by experience. And I would try to, if I was me back then, now, and then, whatever, I would say just be practical and accept what it is, because you can't change that train wreck, and move forward. But this love thing, it's not the first time and the last time you'll fall. I'm still gonna fall in love again a couple of times before I go anywhere, And so this love thing, people don't have nobody knows how to describe love until you go through it. And that's why I feel like Don Tomás Ibarra Frausto's essay, The Geographies of Love, which is included in the catalog, the digital catalog at Chicanx Dreamers and Changemakers, which is at the Contemporary. He breaks it down academically, but again, if you don't know what an apple tastes like, you can't explain what an apple tastes like. Mm-hmm. So you read it and you have this thing to follow, this path, this schedule, whatever it is. By the way, what is this called? Democratizing Racial Justice goes to how I believe life should begin to heal, and it starts with the family and communication and children. And if children are not given the emotional security as children to decide whether they want to play with dolls or they want to, play with toy trains or whatever, then that's a problem, because people need to be allowed to be who they are. And so that's what I would tell myself. I'd be like, it's okay, David, you can paint that Barbie's blonde hair black with a magic marker. That's okay. So whatever we do to find who we are, I would say encourage each other, and mostly younger children that don't have the vocabularies to discuss or describe what they're feeling. And so a younger me didn't know any of that. We didn't have the vocabulary, but now we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I would just say document things, buildings, because you never know when they disappear. And the second thing is buy stock in Apple. That's
You're going to pass? Okay. Jesse? No? You're going to pass?
I think I would tell my younger self to just say yes, never say no to yourself. So I think that's where I would tell myself.
So the other day I dropped a knife on my foot, and I thought I was going to bleed out. And Celia texted me and she said, "How are you?" and so I got real spiritual, and I thought, wow, this is I guess I have a crucifixion complex, because I thought this is where Jesus had the nail in the cross. And so I would say that just I wish I would have taken each day like it was my last, and to treat everyone that I met and every experience like it was my last, and that each moment is very special. And I remember I called David, and he said, "Well, didn't you do that 30 years ago at Chuck Ramirez's? You dropped a knife in your..." And I said, "Wow, that's right." So I felt like the universe was trying to tell me something. And so, that's what I would say.
Wow. I want to thank all of you for sharing wisdom and joy and memories and laughter with us today. You know, I was around a little bit in 2002, but like I said, you know, it was First Fridays and I was in high school, and one of the biggest takeaways for me is I have so much envy of the magic that you all experienced, and yet with our last question, it's such a wonderful, and you know, Anna too, of the memory, with the advice to enjoy the present moment and to recognize that, you know, we are still celebrating so much beautiful culture and so much possibility in our city and in our community, and we're so grateful that you're still all a part of that, and really pillars of the community in your own way. So thank you to Ruby City for having us, to our incredible standing room only audience, and please join us outside for a light reception. Thank you.